From Pacifica, this is Democracy Now!
I think we're probably in that position where we'll just let Obamacare fail. We're not going to own it. I'm not going to own it. I can tell you the Republicans are not going to own it. We'll let Obamacare fail, and then the Democrats are going to come to us and they're going to say, how do we fix it? How do we fix it? Or how do we come up with a new plan?
As the Republican health care bill collapses, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell says he'll try to push through legislation to repeal the Affordable Care Act and wait until after the 2018 midterm elections to propose a replacement. Meanwhile, proponents of a single-payer health care plan are organizing to urge Congress not only to stop the effort to repeal Obamacare, but to pass a bill that would guarantee Medicare for all. We'll speak with Dr. Carol Paris, president of Physicians for a National Health Program. She was arrested Monday during a protest against the Republican health care bill. Then, how Israel's 10-year blockade brought Gaza to the brink of collapse.
Every indicator, from energy to water to healthcare to employment to poverty to food insecurity, every indicator is declining. Gazans have just been going through this slow-motion de-development now for a decade.
Electricity in Gaza is limited to barely 4 hours a day, if that. We'll go directly to Gaza to speak with Raji Sourani, award-winning human rights lawyer, director of the Palestinian Center for Human Rights in Gaza. Then to New York, a Haitian immigrant facing deportation who's lived in this country for decades. He now has 4 U.S.-born children.
My daughter is going to college now, and I'm the one who's helping support her to go to college. What about if I'm deported? How she's going to finish?
All that and more coming up. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. President Donald Trump said Tuesday he plans to let Obamacare fail after Senate Republican leaders failed in a bid to repeal parts of the Affordable Care Act without a replacement in place. The move was opposed by 4 Republicans, including 3 women, Senators Susan Collins, Shelley Moore Capito, and Lisa Murkowski, who, along with Rob Portman, said the effort would deprive millions of Americans of health insurance. All 3 Republican women were left out of a Senate working group comprised of 13 white men that drafted the initial health care bill. On Tuesday, President Trump suggested he might let insurance markets created under Obamacare go under and then try to work with Democrats on a rescue.
I think we're probably in that position where we'll just let Obamacare fail. We're not going to own it. I'm not going to own it. I can tell you the Republicans are not going to own it. We'll let Obamacare fail, and then the Democrats are going to come to us and they're going to say, how do we fix it? How do we fix it? Or how do we come up with a new plan?
President Trump invited all 52 Republican senators to the White House for lunchtime talks aimed at reviving efforts to repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act today. Meanwhile, proponents of a single-payer health care plan are organizing to urge Congress not only to stop the effort to repeal Obamacare, but to pass a bill that would guarantee Medicare for all. On Tuesday, former Vice President Al Gore became the latest prominent Democrat to speak in favor of single-payer.
The private sector has not shown any ability to provide a good, accessible, affordable health care for all. I believe, for example, we ought to have a single-payer health care plan.
We'll have more on the Republicans' failed push on health care and the growing fight for single-payer after headlines. The Republican-controlled House Budget Committee is set to vote today on a draft budget that would slash welfare spending, gut financial regulations, rewrite the tax code to favor the wealthy, and slash $500 billion from Medicare and a $1.5 trillion from Medicaid and Obamacare over the next decade. The budget would also add another $30 billion to Trump's record-setting $668 billion request for Pentagon spending. President Trump held a second previously undisclosed meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin during the G20 summit in Germany earlier this month. On Tuesday, the White House acknowledged the meeting, saying there was nothing unusual about it. But world leaders who witnessed this discussion called it highly unusual for President Trump to single out an adversary while snubbing U.S. allies at a G20 dinner. Trump reportedly spoke for about an hour with Putin over dinner during their second face-to-face talk on July 7th, relying on a Russian government translator because President Trump's interpreter did not speak Russian. The conversation took place out of earshot of nearby observers, and there's no sign the U.S. recorded a transcript of the conversation. Meanwhile, the identity of an eighth person present at a meeting in 2016 between a Russian lawyer and top Trump campaign officials has been revealed. Ike Kavaladze, a Soviet-born U.S. citizen, attended as a representative of the father and son Russian developers who asked for the meeting. In 2000, the U.S. government accused Kavaladze of helping launder $1.4 billion of Russian and Eastern European money through U.S. banks, though he was never charged with a crime. The meeting in June of last year was organized after President Trump's oldest son, Donald Trump Jr., embraced an apparent effort by the Russian government to peddle information incriminating Hillary Clinton in an attempt to help Trump win the presidency. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson has moved to close the State Department's office tasked with holding war criminals accountable. This week, the head of the Office of Global Criminal Justice told his staff he was being reassigned elsewhere and that the office's work would be rolled into another part of the State Department. David Sheffer, who was the first U.S. ambassador at large for war crimes issues, said, quote, "This sends a strong signal to perpetrators of mass atrocities that the United States is not watching you anymore." In Yemen, at least 20 civilians were killed Tuesday as they attempted to flee U.S.-backed Saudi-led airstrikes. Witnesses said a warplane bombed a vehicle packed with families fleeing intense fighting near the city of Taiz. The latest civilian deaths came amidst a massive cholera epidemic brought on by the destruction of Yemen's sanitation, water, and healthcare infrastructure after Saudi-led airstrikes leveled hospitals and clinics across the country. Since April, cholera has sickened 1/3 people and killed over 1,700. Meanwhile, the Saudi-led military coalition prevented a United Nations flight carrying aid workers from reaching the capital Sana'a Tuesday after grounding the flight in Djibouti because 3 journalists were aboard. Saudi authorities Tuesday arrested a woman seen in a widely shared social media video wearing a miniskirt and crop top as she walked through an archaeological site outside Saudi Arabia's capital of Riyadh. Authorities with the Committee for the Promotion of Virtue and the Prevention of Vice said they'd arrested the woman for running afoul of the kingdom's strict dress code for women, but offered few other details. The arrest came as 14 men accused of taking part in pro-democracy rallies are reportedly facing imminent execution, including Mujtaba al-Swaikat, who was just 17 years old and scheduled to fly to Michigan to attend college in the U.S. when he was arrested. In the Gaza Strip, medical workers warn electricity shortages imposed by Israel are threatening the lives of the sick and the elderly. This month, Gazans have received between 2 and 4 hours of power per day after the Palestinian Authority cut payments to Israel for electricity in a bid to isolate and weaken its political rival, Hamas. That's left hospitals scrambling to keep vulnerable patients alive. This is Rita Al-Jalis, whose children suffer from cystic fibrosis.
The electricity shortage affects their treatment very much because they need a machine to help them breathe and they need a cool place. They can't use the machine to breathe because we are mostly without electricity, and when we have it, I can't deal with the 3 of them because it comes for a short time.
In 2012, the World Health Organization warned Gaza would be uninhabitable by 2020, but now the UN says living conditions in Gaza have deteriorated faster than expected, and the area has already become unlivable. We'll have more on the humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza later in the broadcast when we go to Gaza to speak with the human rights lawyer Raji Sourani. The U.S. State Department Tuesday announced new sanctions against Iran over alleged support for terrorism and Iran's ballistic missile program. The move will blacklist 18 people accused of having ties to Iran's military, freezing any of their U.S. assets. The sanctions came one day after President Trump begrudgingly certified that Iran has complied with its obligation under the Obama-brokered nuclear agreement. As a presidential candidate, Trump promised to rip up the Iran nuclear deal, calling it the worst deal ever. a Moroccan court has sentenced 20 independence activists with harsh prison sentences for their role in a 2010 uprising outside the capital city, Laayoune, in Moroccan-occupied Western Sahara. Both Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch are concerned Moroccan authorities used torture to extract confessions from the men, who were sentenced to up to 30 years in prison. Western Sahara's indigenous population, the Sahrawi, have overwhelmingly demanded independence ever since Morocco took over most of Western Sahara in 1975. The trial took place in Rabat, Morocco. In Turkey, a state prosecutor on Tuesday remanded 6 human rights activists, including Amnesty International's Turkish director, Dileser, on charges of membership in a terrorist group. The move means the activists could languish in jail for up to 2 years while awaiting trial. The arrest came as the Turkish president, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, continued to crack down on political opponents in the wake of a failed coup last year. This is Amnesty International's director for Central Asia, Can Dalhujan, who's called the detentions an attack on the core of Turkish civil society.
There is, let's be under no mistake, there is no room in Turkey of today for an independent, critical civil society, independent, critical reporting. This is to be removed from Erdogan's Turkey. Turkey is on a one-way track to a very dark and dangerous place right now.
The Turkish government unveiled a new school curriculum Tuesday that excludes the teaching of Charles Darwin's theory of evolution. The head of the Turkish Teachers Union condemned the move, calling it an assault on science and secularism by President Erdogan's government. In Venezuela, President Nicolas Maduro Tuesday condemned the Trump administration for considering new sanctions against his government over plans for a vote later this month on a new legislative body. On Tuesday, the White House promised strong and swift economic actions if Maduro proceeds with the plan. This is President Maduro.
¿Qué hacemos, compatriota?
What do we do, compatriots? Do we give up? Do we give in? Do we let ourselves be governed by the empire of the North and the right-winged fascism of this continent? Or do we walk with our chest high, lift our honor, and say, we are the children of Simón Bolívar, and we will govern ourselves?
Venezuela scheduled elections on July 30th for a new legislative body known as the Constituent Assembly. The Assembly would have the power to rewrite Venezuela's constitution and annul the opposition-led National Assembly. The move comes amidst massive protests, street clashes, and increasing anti-government violence. Back in the United States, a prosecutor in Cincinnati, Ohio, said Tuesday he would not pursue a third murder trial for white former police officer Ray Tensing, who shot African-American Samuel DuBose in the head in July of 2015 after pulling him over for having a missing front license plate. 2 previous trials ended with hung juries. This is Hamilton County Prosecutor Joseph Dieters.
After discussing this matter with multiple jurors, both black and white, and they have to a person said to us that we will never get a conviction in this case.
Dieter's decision was condemned by the family of Samuel DuBose. This is Trina Allen speaking outside the Hamilton County Courthouse just after learning there would be no retrial of Officer Tensing.
If you're black in the United States of America and the likelihood is a cop won't get indicted, they're just not going to bother with this anymore. That's what they're pretty much saying. They would like to have him go to jail, but they will not be trying to do anything if it's a popularity contest. That's basically what we were just told. Since we got more racists in Hamilton County than not, we can't get a conviction. That's basically what the prosecutor told us.
Samuel DuBose was shot exactly 2 years ago today. After the killing, Officer Tensing stated he opened fire after his arm was caught in DuBose's car door while DuBose drove away. The statement was directly contradicted by Tensing's body cam video. At the time of the killing, Tensing was wearing a T-shirt under his uniform, emblazoned with a Confederate battle flag. And in Seattle, the WNBA's Seattle Storm basketball team has partnered with Planned Parenthood to raise funds and fight back against a Republican-led attack on the Women's Health Organization. On Tuesday night, the Storm donated $5 from each ticket purchased for its game against the Chicago Sky towards Planned Parenthood, and Storm players joined a rally ahead of the game. In a statement, Planned Parenthood said, quote, "Right now, we're seeing a relentless effort to roll back progress for women. Being in this fight alongside our supporters and the Storm is an honor," unquote. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Senate Republicans are trying to regroup after their latest efforts to overhaul or repeal the Obamacare failed, dealing a sharp setback to Donald Trump and the GOP's 7-year quest to kill President Barack Obama's signature health care law. The defeat shook financial markets Tuesday. The dollar fell to a 10-month low over doubts that Trump could push other domestic policy priorities, such as tax reform, through a divided Congress. Expressing disappointment, Trump suggested he might let insurance markets created under Obamacare go under and then try to work with Democrats on a rescue.
I think we're probably in that position where we'll just let Obamacare fail. We're not going to own it. I'm not going to own it. I can tell you the Republicans are not going to own it. We'll let Obamacare fail, and then the Democrats are going to come to us and they're going to say, how do we fix it? How do we fix it? Or how do we come up with a new plan?
The Senate Republican plan to repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act collapsed Monday night after Republican Senators Jerry Moran of Kansas and Mike Lee of Utah announced they would not support the latest version of the bill, ensuring Republicans would not have enough votes to pass it. Their announcement came at the same time President Trump, who has heavily backed the Senate bill, was meeting with 7 Republican senators who did support the measure. The legislation would have cut $700 billion from Medicaid. It faced opposition from all Senate Democrats, a slew of governors from both parties, the majority of the healthcare industry, the American Medical Association, hospitals, doctors, nurses, patient advocacy groups, and the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops. Speaking on Tuesday, House Democratic leader Nancy Pelosi applauded voters for standing up in town hall meetings and demanding their representatives reject the Republican bill.
The president in a statement said today his health care proposals were defeated because he didn't have the cooperation of any of the Democrats and some of the Republicans. No. He has never really been about increasing access, lowering cost, improving benefits. That's what the Affordable Care Act is about. So the reason the Republicans in the leadership in the Senate have found themselves in the situation there is because people have spoken out.
Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell said he'll try to push through legislation to repeal the Affordable Care Act next week and wait until after the 2018 midterm elections to propose a replacement. Meanwhile, proponents of a single-payer health care plan are organizing to urge Congress not only to stop the effort to repeal Obamacare, but to pass a bill that would guarantee Medicare for all. On Tuesday, former Vice President Al Gore became the latest prominent Democrat to speak in favor of single-payer.
The private sector has not shown any ability to provide a good, accessible, affordable health care for all. I believe, for example, we ought to have a single-payer health care plan.
Well, for more, we go to Washington, D.C., where we're joined by Dr. Carol Parris, president of Physicians for a National Health Program. She was arrested Monday at the Hart Senate office during a protest against the Republican health care bill. In March, she spoke out during a Donald Trump rally where she lives in Nashville. Dr. Parris, welcome to Democracy Now! Can you talk about your latest arrest, what you were calling for? Now, you got arrested Monday right before the Republican health care bill collapsed. But talk about what you were calling for then and still calling for today.
I'd be happy to. The reason that I decided to get arrested was to really make it clear that as physicians, we not only oppose any bill that is going to be hurtful to Americans, and this bill clearly is hurtful, leaving 22 million people off of insurance, but we also champion and advance Medicare for all. That is really the plan that's going to accomplish what both President Obama and President Trump have said that they support, which is better benefits, lower costs, and more coverage. It's just that the ACA hasn't been able to accomplish that, and neither is what the Republicans are doing. Clearly, that's not going to accomplish it. So the only thing that's going to work is moving forward now to Medicare for all. And so that was the messaging on Monday. Kill the bill, Medicare for all.
Senator Bernie Sanders said on MSNBC's All In show last night that while the American Health Care Act is not perfect, it should be improved, not destroyed. He laid out his suggestions for how.
What we need to do is, among other things, in my view, lower the cost of prescription drugs, save consumers, save the government substantial sums of money. What we need to do is provide for a public option in every state in this country. What we need to do is lower the cost, lower Medicare eligibility from 65 to 55, and then begin the process of doing what every other major country on earth is doing, and that is guaranteeing health care to all people as a right through a Medicare for All single-payer program.
So, Dr. Carol Parris, if you can parse that out, first of all, is that what you are calling for? And explain what this would mean, what it means to save Obamacare and then move forward with single-payer or Medicare for all.
What it means to save Obamacare or to save the ACA is to continue the cost-sharing subsidies, to continue to support Medicaid expansion. But I absolutely don't agree with Senator Sanders that the way forward is to have a public option and lower the Medicare age from 65 to 55. That is more incremental steps, and it absolutely fails to accomplish what a national single-payer Medicare for All plan does, which is put everyone in the same risk pool. That's how we garner the $500 billion, $500 billion of savings in administrative waste and profit of the for-profit insurance industry. If we create a public option, we're just creating another opportunity for the insurance companies, the health insurance companies, to put all the sickest people in the public option and keep all the healthiest young people in their plans. So, no, I don't agree that doing this incrementally is a good idea. We really need to go forward now to a national improved Medicare for all. And really, the bill in Congress, H.R. 676, Congressman Conyers' bill, is the way we need to go.
So what exactly would it look like? I mean, you have, on the one hand, President Trump saying, let Obamacare fail. First, tell us what that would mean and what it would mean if the government lets Obamacare fail. And then what it would mean to institute Medicare for all, how you go about doing this.
Letting Obamacare fail, I think, is what the president has implied that he could do pretty easily. The next cost-sharing subsidy payment is due out Thursday, and if he doesn't continue to fund that, the insurance companies are going to go into even more chaos and uncertainty. And what that's going to translate into is increases in premiums, not just for people on the subsidies, but everyone in the individual market is going to see their insurance premiums go up by double digits. I've heard as high as even 52%. So that's what's going to happen if, in the short term, if the president just allows the ACA to languish and fail. How do we go forward to a Medicare for all? Well, we passed Medicare in 1965, and in 1 year from the date the bill was passed, in 1 year it was implemented. And it happened with a computer system in 1965 that was a whole lot less sophisticated than what we have right now. So I think what we are lacking is the political will to make it happen. We sure aren't lacking the popular will to have it happen. The American people want this. And what I'm seeing is a growing interest. I live in Nashville, Tennessee, and that's a red state. My congressman, Jim Cooper, is a Blue Dog Democrat. He's never supported H.R. 676 in the past, and this year he became a co-sponsor. I was really glad to hear that Al Gore, another Tennessean, is saying we need a national improved Medicare for all. This is coming from legislators and former legislators in a red state. That makes me very proud to be from Nashville.
Well, also Elizabeth Warren of Massachusetts has expressed her support for single-payer, but we don't see that movement in the Senate or the House, even with 676, which has been introduced for years. It would take political capital on the part of many senators and Congress members to push this forward.
It would. And I think the way we're going to do this is we're not going to wait around for our members of Congress to say now it's politically feasible. If we wait for that, we're going to be waiting for the rest of my life, your life, and many more lives. What we have to do is more of what is happening in Congress right now. It's like Occupy Congress, and that is having the American people join in a movement of movements. I got arrested. I was sitting in the paddy wagon with 4 other people, including 3 young millennials, incredibly energetic young people, and we discovered that we all represented different organizations and didn't know anything about each other's organizations. And yet, we'd all been arrested together, championing, opposing the BCRA and championing Medicare for all. So it's going to take a movement of movements, and it's going to take the American people making it toxic for our elected officials not to get on board with this.
Well, Dr.
We have to take the lead, and they will follow.
Dr. Carol Paris, I want to thank you for being with us. President of Physicians for National Health Program arrested Monday at the Hart Senate office building during protests of the Republican health care bill. This is Democracy Now! When we come back, we go to Gaza to find out what is happening there. Barely 4 hours, if that, of electricity per day. The UN says it is unlivable. Stay with us.
وتراثنا الشاهد على وجودنا من هيك لبست الثوب الفلسطيني من حفا جنين جبل النار إلى رام الله خليني نشوف الكوفية البيضة والحمراء خلينا نعليها لفوق بالسما أنا شاهدية العرب لساني بغص غزل زاني بهز هزكلي ماتي حرب سجل أنا شادية منصور والحطة هويتي من يوم ما خلقت سيدي والشعب مسؤوليتي لك أنا تربيت بين الغرب وبين
Haji Mansour here on Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. We turn now to Gaza, where Israeli-imposed restrictions continue to limit electricity to barely 4 hours a day, creating a humanitarian catastrophe for its 2 million residents. The Palestinian authorities back the Israeli siege in an attempt to isolate and weaken its political rival, Hamas, the group that has controlled Gaza for the last 10 years. Gaza has been under Israeli siege for more than a decade. In 2012, the World Health Organization warned Gaza would be uninhabitable by 2020, but now the UN says the living conditions in Gaza have deteriorated faster than expected, and the area has already become unlivable. This is the UN Humanitarian Coordinator for Occupied Palestinian Territory, Robert Piper.
I see this extraordinarily inhuman and an unjust process of strangling gradually 2 million civilians in Gaza that really pose a threat to nobody. I don't know, we talk about the unlivability of Gaza. When you're down to 2 hours a day of electricity, which is the case earlier this week, when you've got 60% youth unemployment rates, where you really do have such a little horizon. For me, and you probably, and most of the people watching, that unlivability threshold has been passed quite a long time ago.
To talk more about the situation, we go directly to Gaza, where we're joined by Raji Sourani, the award-winning human rights lawyer, director of the Palestinian Center for Human Rights in Gaza, on the executive board of the International Federation for Human Rights. He received the Robert F. Kennedy Human Rights Award in 1991, was also twice named an Amnesty International Prisoner of Conscience. We welcome you to Democracy Now!, Raji. Can you talk about what is happening right now in Gaza?
Well, it's the 50th anniversary of belligerent criminal Israeli occupation, and it's 11 years since the siege on Gaza has been imposed, which is illegal, inhuman, and consists collective punishment. And at this moment, I mean, the siege on the peak, we are living the biggest man-made disaster, and as the Israeli promised, rightly, they will send us to the Middle Ages, and they do. Gaza completely disconnected from the outside world, subjugated during this period to 3 offensives by Israel in the eye of the storm, were civilian and civilian targets. And after all these years, we are unable to rebuild or reconstruct most of these destructions. This led us to a situation where almost 65% unpaid or unemployed, 90% under poverty line, and almost 85% of the population depends on UNRWA, World Food Program, and other charities' rations and food. Effectively, they are making Gaza animal farm, international community dumping some food and medicine. We cannot treat our water. We cannot treat our sewage. And our entire sea polluted, and our water undrinkable. They put people in a situation where no hope for tomorrow, and people in the verge of collapse. There is 2 million people suffering this for the last 11 years. The last thing, I mean, we are having, it's the electricity. It used to be 6-7 hours a day. Now we are having only 2 hours. And you can imagine the drastic effect for this on all aspects of life, on medical care, on operations, on dialysis, on heart surgeries, on people who are suffering, on the food. Stuff should be fragile and so on. All aspects of life in Gaza in the verge of collapse, and we are sure the worst yet to come. Every day the Israelis are bringing evil mind and evil practice to this part of the world.
Just can you describe even in more detail what it means not to have electricity? I mean, for people in any city like New York years ago, we suffered the blackout. Obviously, it's catastrophic. But explain what it means to have 2, if you're lucky, 4 hours of electricity a day, how it affects daily living, how it affects the hospitals, how it affects the clean water, etc.
I mean, Gaza is one of the most dense populated area on earth, and we are having buildings with 14, 16 stories now. And it's mission impossible, I mean, to send water to these stories out, because you need electricity even to pump this unusable water. So having water, most of Gaza, I mean, it's not there. Second, the desalination factories, it doesn't work. I mean, if it work like 2 hours, which is not enough. Minimum should work like 20 hours a day to supply Gaza with water. The sewage factories cannot work, and because it cannot work, it cannot be treated, and the entire raw sewage dumped to the sea, and this affect, I mean, the entire sea, and it's contaminated, and it's nobody, I mean, can swim in it because it's totally polluted. If you go to the meat store, you will find it, I mean, max for 1 day. The rest, I mean, they will send it to the garbage, because Most of the people here, because they are poor, they depend on frozen meat and frozen fish imported from outside. They cannot store it, so it just get bad, and it's not for human use. If you go to the hospitals, I mean, it's the real disaster. Operation theaters cannot work, and the operations cannot be carried. Dialysis machines, most of the time, because they stop, they get interrupted and broken. So many of the dialysis patients, I mean, cannot do that. All those who are in automatic respiratory systems or intensive care units, you can imagine when you are lack of electricity about that. Even, I mean, simple things like housewives, I mean, they cannot use laundry, they cannot store food at their fridges and so on. Factories, it's mission impossible, I mean, to make it work. I mean, Gaza almost with no ice cream, I mean, for the time being, or other kinds of food stuff needs, electricity. Most of the Gaza, I mean, like 20, 22 hours a day, it's dark. I mean, during the night, you cannot really have a light in the streets, and that's what makes, even the number of vital car accidents, happens here, and people, I mean, as a result of that, I mean, pay their life. On the level of education, people who just want to go back from their schools, from their work, to the high stories, they cannot, I mean, go up 14, 16 stories back and forth. You can imagine people who are sick and he or she had heart surgery, want to get back, go to the hospital or to be treated. It's not normal life. We are just in the middle centuries. While we are paying a bill, it's not less than of the cost than the European standard bill of electricity.
Raji Sourani, award-winning human rights lawyer, speaking to us from Gaza City. In the background, you hear a generator. Raji, can you talk about how the situation has gotten to this point? Talk about what the Israeli government is saying, what they're saying about Hamas, and how you see some kind of solution coming out of all of this.
Well, I mean, on Gaza beautiful shores, I mean, we are having one of the biggest gas wells in the Mediterranean. And all what we need, small pipe, I mean, coming to Gaza, and to install a factory for electricity, and then we can have factory for us and for the region, maybe. But we are not lack of business people, of scientists, we are not lack of professionals, we are lack of opportunity. The occupation wants us to be as such, living in such conditions. They want to shift Gaza to be not Hamas place, but ISIS country. When you put collectively 2 million people under such a pressure, nobody can leave or come in. Movement of individuals, mission impossible. When you make them unable to receive developed medical care, when you make them unable to receive their basic needs of goods, when you make them disconnected from the outside world, when you make them unable to go and receive developed medical care outside or developed education outside, when they are not allowed to import and export normally and as they want, when you make the death and destruction around them day and night, when you make them lose hope of tomorrow, this is the recipe for ISIS, I mean, to exist in this part of the world, because what we are having here, the Quran of ISIS, it's the rule of jungle. That's what we are having here. And all what we are seeking, asking, rule of law, nothing less, nothing more. There is 2 million civilians living this in part of the world. They are subjugated, as even the ICRC, Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, everybody says in the international arena and international community, this is illegal, inhuman, collective punishment, and should be imminently and completely lifted and give people the right of movement. We are not asking anything more than what the rights enjoyed and should be ensured by the international community. The right has been guaranteed in international law and international humanitarian law. This is not a war crime. This is a crime against humanity. But we are seeing nobody moving in this regard. Nobody think after 50 years of having an end for occupation. If not an end of occupation, which is our right, it's our absolute right on the individual and collective level, but at least, I mean, give us the right of movement, the right to be basically enjoying minimal conditions of human being. We are not. We are not.
Raji Sourani,
living these conditions and situation deteriorating. Yeah.
Has this situation changed in any way? What kind of effect has the new president in the United States, President Trump, had on the situation? And what do you feel that Americans can do?
Americans can do a lot, a lot. America is a great country and they can contribute positively. President Eisenhower in 1957, when Israel occupied Gaza, in one day he ordered them to be out, and they were out. And obviously, since President Trump came to his presidency, I think the Palestinians one of the scapegoats for his policy, and we are paying dearly and heavily because he's giving 100% support from wall to wall to a criminal Israeli policy against the Palestinian people. He doesn't talk about end of occupation. He doesn't talk about end of the Palestinian suffering. He doesn't talk about two-state solution. He's just living 100% control for the Israelis over the Palestinians. He didn't criticize what American government in very consecutive way used to do by condemning settlements policy and the siege policy. He's doing nothing except supporting, endorsing the Israeli policy, even criticizing Israel in the US or the UNESCO. He considered it as a crime, and he gave the oath, and the representative of him in the UN Security Council said, we will not allow anything happen against the state of Israel, as if Israel is little God, mini God, above criticism. They are doing nothing. It's not what we are saying against Israel. Forget what Palestinian human rights organizations, civil society are saying against Israel. Look what the Israeli human rights organization saying about the policies of Israel. Look to what B'Tselem saying against Israel. Look to what all international human rights organizations, with no exception, criticizing Israel and the policies about war crimes, the crimes against humanity. Even if we want to go and resort to the ICC, International Criminal Court, to hold Israel accountable, U.S. is threatening. So effectively, President Trump giving license to kill to Israel. They are giving them the authorization, full authorization to do whatever they want against the Palestinian civilians. We are not in defense of Hamas or Fatah or PFLP. We are in defense of the Palestinian civilians who are in international law, should enjoy absolute protection, and they are called in Geneva Conventions the protected civilians, meaning there is real obligation by law to Palestinian civilians in the occupied territories, and they are in the eye of the storm of the Israeli criminal policies in the occupied territories.
I want to thank you, Raji Sourani, for joining us from Gaza City under these extremely difficult conditions, what the UN is calling unlivable. Final 30 seconds that we have on the satellite with you, Raji, for your final comment.
We have no right to give up, and we will not give up. We have just fair and right cause. We are strong enough, because we are fighting for the rule of law, not for the rule of jungle as Israel wants. We will keep our level of moral superiority on a criminal occupation. We know we are not alone. Free, committed people across the globe standing with us. They are standing with justice, rule of law, and dignity of human being.
Raji Sourani joining us from Gaza City, award-winning human rights lawyer, director of the Palestinian Center for Human Rights in Gaza, on the executive board of the International Federation for Human Rights, received the Robert F. Kennedy Human Rights Prize in 1991, twice named an Amnesty International Prisoner of Conscience. We in New York are joined by Tarek Bakoni, who is the author of the forthcoming book, Hamas Contained, The Rise and Pacification of Palestinian Resistance, a policy fellow at Al-Shabaka, the Palestinian Policy Network. And he has written a new article for The Nation titled How Israel's 10-Year Blockade Brought Gaza to the Brink of Collapse. Very briefly, Tarek, you're here in the United States, so of course you've also been in Gaza, but there is almost no coverage of what's happening in Gaza here. So most Americans have no idea.
I think that's absolutely right. I think the way that Gaza gets portrayed in American media is in one of two ways. It's either portrayed as nothing more than a humanitarian catastrophe, some sort of post-apocalyptic reality where life is catastrophic, which, of course, that is one side of the situation in Gaza. And the other way it's often portrayed is as a terrorist haven, as an enclave on the Mediterranean that is ruled by a bloodthirsty terrorist organization. And both those ways of portraying Gaza are extremely simplistic. They leave no room for understanding the complexities of the situation, for understanding what people in Gaza are facing on a human level, on a day-to-day basis. It dehumanizes everything about the Gaza Strip. So it removes any room for empathy or understanding the complexity, and it removes the fact that this is a political problem that's man-made.
Have things gotten worse since President Trump took office?
Absolutely. I think things have gotten much worse, and in a very short period of time, for a number of reasons. I think what we're seeing happening in the region, let's say between the GCC and Qatar now, is mirrored in the microcosm that is Gaza now, or the Palestinian territories. The way these countries have taken solace in the Trump administration, the way they've started to move against quote-unquote Islamic extremism. We see that happening on a very small scale within the Palestinian territories. So President Mahmoud Abbas's decision in the West Bank to start tightening the blockade, although it's informed by local politics as well, and we can talk about that, but it's very much a signal to the Trump administration to say, this is, I'm taking a tough stance against Islamic extremism, I'm taking a tough stance against Hamas. If there's a peace process that's going to start, I'm your man on the ground. And so this message plays into this rationale of isolating the Gaza Strip and of using 2 million inhabitants as political pawns.
Your sense of right now, Israel vis-a-vis Hamas and the victims being the 2 million people who are in Gaza right now, what do you see as the solution?
Look, I think Gaza has long been a problem for Israel, even before Hamas was even created, let alone come into power. So the idea that the Israeli policies towards the Gaza Strip are somehow informed by Hamas is a misreading of the history of the situation. The reason that Gaza presents such a problem for the Israelis is because they're majority refugees. They have political rights. They're demanding their political rights. And so Hamas, in a way, presents Israel with a fig leaf, with an excuse to maintain the policies of isolation and the policies of containment. So even if Hamas were to be removed from the equation tomorrow, the policies around Gaza aren't necessarily going to change. And so to my mind, until we start dealing with Gaza as a political problem rather than an economic problem or a religious problem, until we start addressing the political drivers that animate resistance from Gaza, so the right of return, the right to self-determination. Dr. Serrani spoke very eloquently about the right to live and the freedom of movement. Until we start talking about these political rights, the situation in Gaza isn't going to change. And the U.S. has a big role to play in that. The U.S. has, not just under the Trump administration, but under previous administrations as well, played a very strong role in supporting Israeli policies to divide the Gaza Strip from the West Bank and to prevent any form of unity government between the PA and Hamas from emerging. The blockade is not criticized at all by the U.S., even though it is a form of collective punishment, and even though it also comes with, 3 military assaults that result in thousands of deaths, of civilian deaths, that are disproportionate and crimes against humanity. And so until we start addressing Gaza as a political problem, not as a humanitarian problem, until we start seeing it as part and parcel of the Palestinian struggle for self-determination, nothing will change.
Tarek Bakoni, I want to thank you for being with us. His forthcoming book, Hamas Contained, The Rise and Pacification of Palestinian Resistance. Thanks so much. And we'll link to your piece in The Nation. This is Democracy Now! When we come back, a Haitian resident of New York with 4 U.S. citizen children has a check-in with immigration authorities Thursday morning. He fears he will be deported. We'll speak with him and his daughter. Stay with us.
Sans défense, la justice dégainée, nous pas même gain droit plein. Ça va qu'on est, même si a fait nous souffrir, nous pas jamba les gains. Yo joué à 6 fan ba nous menti, n'a sauté dans pétrin.
Prophecy by Parlene Pesca here on DemocracyNow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. We end today's show with a guest who says he made a mistake when he was a teenager that could lead to his deportation nearly 3 decades later. Gene Montreville came to the U.S. from Haiti with a green card in 1986 at the age of 17. During the height of the crack epidemic, he was convicted of possession of cocaine and sentenced to 11 years in prison. He served that time. Upon his release, he married a U.S. citizen, had 4 children, became a successful small businessman, as well as an immigrant rights activist. He's had no further interaction with the criminal justice system. But because of his earlier conviction, Gene is required to check in with immigration officers regularly under a supervision program. Gene joined us in 2010 after he was detained at one of these check-ins and came very close to being deported to Haiti. But when a fellow detainee on the plane bound for Haiti had a fever, the illness halted the flight. And then in that week, the 2010 earthquake struck in Haiti. With the country too devastated to deport people to, Gene was released. Since then, he's continued to check in with no further threats of deportation until last month, when he went to his first check-in under President Trump. Without any advance notice, he was detained, handcuffed, processed to be deported until calls from his supporters apparently prompted immigration officials to release him. Well, Thursday, tomorrow, he has to check in again, and is concerned he will again be detained and deported. This comes as Haiti, the poorest nation in the Western Hemisphere, continues to recover from the devastating earthquake of 2010. It's also suffered from a disastrous hurricane and cholera outbreak. And this week, President Trump's top immigration official warned members of Congress that Haitians living in the U.S. under a special temporary protected status may soon be placed in line for deportation. Last week, about 50 of Jean's supporters participated in a Jericho walk organized by the New Sanctuary Coalition and marched silently around the federal building where he'll check in here in New York. Another Jericho walk is scheduled for Thursday when he returns. For more, we are joined by Jean Montreville himself in studio, along with his eldest daughter, 18-year-old Janiyah Hurd, and his lawyer, Joshua Bar-David. We welcome you all to Democracy Now!
Thank you, Amy, for having us.
Talk about what you face tomorrow, Jean.
Well, tomorrow is going to be my second check-in on the Trump. And last month, they gave me another month when after they had tried to keep me. And I really don't know what's going to happen tomorrow because of what happened last month when they tried to keep me to deport me. And tomorrow, it's anyone guesses, you know.
You have lived here for 30 years.
Yes. 31
years.
Yes.
Janiyah, you wrote us a very poignant letter about your father. You're in college now.
Yes.
And talk about your concerns, what this means for your family, for you and your siblings.
I don't think they realize, like, you coming in people's lives just to basically, you're going to turn our lives upside down because no one should have to wake up thinking, well, am I going to be deported tomorrow or the next day? And I don't think my brother and sister, they don't really understand it because maybe my little brother does, but my little sister, she was a baby when this first happened, so she doesn't really get it now. So this is going to be really different for her, and she's like a daddy's girl. So now it's going to be hard for her to go to school every day.
Did your brother just undergo an operation?
Yes, he just undergo brain surgery. They found a tumor, which they acted really quickly on it, and they took it out, and he's doing very well now.
And what will this mean for you at college? Where are you going to college?
I go to Mercy College in Dobbs Ferry, New York. This would mean I would have to find a way to basically apply for financial aid because I'm unable to apply without my dad, and I would have to find a way to pay for college out of pocket, which is really expensive now. And I go to a private college, so I'm not under the free tuition they just started. So it's either transfer or I would have to just maybe take a semester off to think about things.
Mm-hmm. And Joshua Bar-David, talk about why this is happening. Is ICE targeting Jean Montreville?
Well, Jean does have an order of deportation, which we're working on trying to fix. I don't think they're necessarily singling him out. I think that some of the rhetoric from the senior members of the administration, including the president himself, have resulted in an increased enforcement across the board. But unfortunately, there's also been a lot of rhetoric regarding Haitians. And as a result, I do think that there's been an increased targeting of Haitian nationals.
But there is a stay on the deportation of Haitians until January. Why is this happening now to Jean?
I think November is why it's happening now to Jean. What happened in November, the election, has resulted in a change in policy towards Haitians specifically.
Does Jean go to jail in Haiti if he is deported?
That is a concern of ours. There have been reports that deportees to Haiti have been imprisoned.
Yes,
and what would that mean, Jean?
Well, once you get deported from here as a criminal alien, there's a process you got to go through in Haiti. You got to be interviewed by the Haitian government, and then you have to have a family member to come and sign you off. I have no family in Haiti. All my family lives over here now, you know. And if you can't get out, you got to pay money to get out. They are making money off criminal deportees in Haiti. And people have died in the Haitian jails now.
I mean, I certainly remember the jail collapsing at the time of the earthquake.
I talked to a friend of mine in Haiti last week. He said people are dying in those jails. Those jails used to put 50 people, and they have 400 people in them.
So we have 10 seconds. What can happen tomorrow in the ICE check-in? What are you calling for, Joshua?
We're just asking for ICE to allow Jean to continue to check in, as he has been doing for years without incident.
For 12 years now, I've been checking in.
How often?
Once a month. It started once a month, and they started giving me every 6 months. Until last month, they asked me, they will give me another month. I want to be able to stay here, get the case reopened, for the BIA to have the case reopened.
Well, we're going to have to leave it there, but we'll certainly continue to cover this case. I want to thank Jean Montreville, Janiyah Hurd, Jean's daughter, and Joshua Bar-David, his attorney. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org. I'm Amy Goodman. Thanks for joining us.